Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll get going. Our participant number is just about where it needs to be and climbing. Certainly, those who join us late are welcome. As usual, I'll go through and sort of reinforce our communication that we sent out, or communications that we sent out last week regarding the repopulation of campus. We're certainly excited for all of our students who are able to return. And also wish that everyone and hope that you all had a happy, healthy, and enjoyable holiday season. And let's hope for a much better 2021 as we head into the new year. A few things I want to go over as we continue to bring the Penguins home task force is that what I'll do tonight, again, as I said, is review some of the information shared, share some additional information. And then at the end, I've asked our Director of Health Services, Elise Lewis, our Director of Student Affairs, Joshua Doyon, Director of Athletics, Jennifer Viana, and our Director of Academic Affairs, Raja Bala, to join me in answering some of your questions. You can certainly put those in the Q&A as we have this conversation tonight. And if we don't get to your question or it doesn't get answered to your satisfaction, please reach out to me. Please reach out to one of the individuals from our leadership team on our panel tonight, and we'll certainly get that in for those answers for you. So feel free to put those in the Q&A and I'll answer them at the end and also hopefully answer them in your presentation tonight. I know that in the registration or during the registration process, we did provide the opportunity for questions. If those were specific to you, those questions were answered, or we tried to get those answers back to you through communication. So some of you already did receive answers. And others we would address here tonight and certainly can on a one-on-one basis moving forward. So just as we typically do, I'll give a sort of pandemic update, usually giving statistics. We'll go back one, usually giving statistics from where we are, the information we gather. And I usually talk about is, really our leadership team, our medical team, as we're looking to make decisions, all we're gathering is points of data, bits of information from reliable sources, chatting as a team, chatting as a medical team about what that means for Cushing and what are the best choices that we can make in order to open safely and protect the most vulnerable in our community and maintain that positive or as positive experience as we can for our students moving forward. And certainly I think when we adjusted our schedule earlier this year, creating 2 smaller segments, that was due to feedback from parents and also employees about what worked in the fall and what didn't. And so that we feel like is going to be certainly, 2 easier chunks to live through rather than one long stretch. But also when we start, thinking about that, also want to give you the reality of the information that we're collecting in terms of the public health situation. So Massachusetts has changed its reporting. You'll notice this slide looks a little bit different than previous ones. They've created this interactive COVID dashboard, which gives similar information to the previous dashboards that we've shared in the past. So you can see this was released yesterday as of the day before. So there is a lag in the data, but it's a little bit more comprehensive that there were 5,200 cases, which is a little bit down compared to some of the numbers that we have seen, but still really high and much higher than we saw in the fall. Towards the end of the fall semester, we were in the 2000s, and then after Thanksgiving certainly got a bump, but we are looking to come back to campus with a much different public health situation than we were in the fall, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this tonight. Other areas that we look at for information, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the COVID Act Now, but certainly a very user-friendly website that you can look at, nonprofit organization that gives data. It's covidactnow.org. You can check that out. And this is, Massachusetts statistics. And you see there's sort of in the upper right-hand corner, this is a screenshot of today. You can see on the bottom, January 14th, but you can, on the real website, receive alerts. So when the risk level changes, you can break it down by county or state. You can receive email or I believe text notifications on that. So right now, Massachusetts is, at the highest level. Daily cases are significant, infection rates sort of in the middle, and ICU capacity is high, which classifies the state in a high level. So again, another piece of data to show how we're repopulating and coming back to campus in a much different environment than the fall. Although we are doing it a second time, so we have learned a little bit from how that went in the fall, and that'll help us move forward as well. This is another, you see the source at the bottom, of Flourish map. So the state formerly in the fall used to produce this interactive map that you could do that they don't, but Flourish does that. And this shows, again, you see all those red towns, the high. Ashburnham is up here. So we are in the red. Winchendon is to our left, Ashby's to our right, surrounding communities, Gardner, Leominster, and others. You can go online and play with that tool. It's kind of a neat tool to show your specific municipality, town, what it looks like, what the rates are, and how that's trending, or at least from looking backwards sort of to now. So another indicator, another data point. And then another one that we look at, the COVID outbreak detection tool, which is, you can search that. Here's the website down at the bottom, analytics, and it's a project of Mass General, Harvard Medical School, Georgia Tech, and Boston Medical Center. And if those other sort of indicators, looked pretty grim, this one actually provides some hope. And if you looked at this a week ago, it was much more red. And this is predicted doubling time for cases. And you can see we're in much lighter, the lightest category, actually yellow in our area here near Fitchburg and Worcester County. So there is, some positive trends on the horizon, hopefully. I mean, this certainly next week could be red depending on the state of the pandemic and how that changes. But this was, I got this today from the modeling website. So certainly something also you can look at and, follow along with us and know that this is another tool that we're looking at. So gathering all those pieces of information to, sort of analyze, okay, we have a population of students coming from around the US, around the world, how they're going to get here, the testing that we have into place, which I'll talk about. What does the environment look like, and how can we prepare for that here on campus? So just to highlight some of the data that we're looking at. And then that leads us to our dimmer switch. And I did review this last time at our webinar in December, but just want to make sure that it's clear that and this is still up on the COVID webpage, that it not only applies to cases on campus, but also the public health situation. We're not a completely closed system. There is a need for comings and goings, and we try to minimize that as much as possible on campus. So I think there was some frustration that it didn't move as quick, or didn't move like folks thought it would move, and so certainly want to improve that expectation, or at least make it clear that that's going to move with the public health situation as well as the situation on campus. So it's sort of looking at those two data points, what it's like here on campus, in our town, in our local area, what the public health situation looks like, in all of Massachusetts, East Coast, and then how do we make a determination that's best for our community and move that switch as needed. So certainly feel free to go back and take a look at that. If you still have questions, or there's confusion, I'm happy to have individual conversations or Zoom or over the phone as needed. Just let me know. Before we get to the presentation tonight, I just wanted to give a flavor to everyone of some of the sample responses. So when we send out the registration for the webinar, you can give a question. And certainly, I try to tailor the presentation to highlight some of those. And so you can see that they're all over the map, right? There are some who approach coming to school in the fall from a different mindset than others, and none are right or wrong. It sort of is very personal in how you're coming, but at the same time, we have to create an environment, like we said all along, where we can open, we can safely open, we can stay open, we can protect the most vulnerable in our community, and that we're following recommendations from our health team, from the CDC, and that lands us in a place where we're putting into mitigation strategies to continue in-person learning throughout the rest of the spring semester. So you can see sort of both sides of this. Given the extreme, I'll sort of look at the left and compare with the right. Extreme COVID rates in Worcester County. Are there additional precautions being taken? And you saw the state of the pandemic, local and regional health situation, what that looks like in relation to COVID-19. And so, certainly we're looking at that. And then you look at the other side, will there be winter sport games, not inter-squad scrimmaging, full transparency? What do you anticipate the boarding students' day and life to look like? Will there be more normalcy than last fall? So it's balancing those things, right? There are some folks who really want us to move away from mitigation. There are some who want more, and we're looking to thread that needle for as positive student experience, but also to ensure we're doing all we can for safety and following guidelines. Next one, I'm excited that you're reopening school, but nervous about the high rate of infection. Other side, Will everyone be required to quarantine in their rooms at the beginning? Hopefully won't be as strict and isolating this semester. And we'll go on to answer some of these questions. I mean, certainly I don't anticipate that day in the life in the spring to look any different than a day in the life in the fall, for two reasons. One, cases are higher, and we're into an environment where, we even have different strains and it could be more contagious. And certainly we know that it worked in the fall and did maintain our safety. I think there are some small adjustments that we can make, but overall, I want everybody to anticipate, yes, it would be the same as the fall was. And I can talk a little bit more to that. Certainly when we're talking about transparency, we're giving as much as we know. Part of the reason I feel like there isn't certainty in this situation, and folks feel like that, and then feels like we're not being transparent, is probably because there isn't certainty. I'm giving you what we know in real time and what we can anticipate, and a lot of the answers are, we don't know, but we're preparing for all options. And so certainly that can be frustrating, and I understand that, but we're continually willing to engage in the conversations and do the best we can to maintain an in-person experience. Third one, how will you control the spread of COVID if students are allowed off campus for appointments? Third, on the other side, will students be allowed to leave campus to play interscholastic games, right? So again, different approaches, different concerns from families. Thanks for making it possible for students to attend in person this year. We as parents know it wasn't an easy process. When will the guidelines for quarantining, testing, repopulation after spring break be available? And other side, will parents be allowed to visit? As I said, I don't anticipate major changes from the fall. So certainly we will start, without visitors and playing athletics on campus, but hope to move to interscholastic competition. I will say their athletics is part of the presentation, and I'll repeat this later on, but we do need opponents to play in conversation with heads of schools at independent boarding schools in Massachusetts, because that's who we have to play. We can't cross state lines because of regulations that we're under to play athletics, nor can we play public schools. And if we do play, we want to play schools that are taking the same mitigation, testing, control strategies that we are, testing before, and those kinds of things. So that does sort of limit the number of schools we can play. And then in having conversations with those heads of schools, the answer is pretty universally what I'm telling you tonight. We're hopeful. We'd like to, potentially have some games. We'd like to schedule. We are building, like Cushing, we are building a schedule. But the commitment is still soft, because there is that unknown future, and unfortunately that's the environment that we're in right now. So we are continuing to do our planning committees, student experience, which looks at athletics, as I just spoke about, academics, student affairs, residential life, extracurriculars, looking at campus operations, facilities, food service, IT, transportation, health and wellness, communications, which includes, sent messaging to everyone here tonight, and also our winter room, which started that your children are taking a part in, which will continue for the first few weeks that they're here, and then we will switch over to a more similar schedule that we had in the fall. But all of those subcommittees still continuing to meet a lot of work. So as we move towards the spring semester and having students on campus, I want to talk a little bit about sort of requirements on just getting to campus. I know we put these out in communications last week, but I thought it important to review since we still had a lot of questions on them. Pre-arrival quarantine. So all students to begin quarantine today, January 14th. We're arrival 2 weeks from today, on January 28th and 29th. So that's limiting contacts to members of students' own household. And that's really important as we get towards repopulating campus. There are other boarding schools now repopulating campus, and we know that they are experiencing much higher positive rates with student arrival to campus. And really that's in everyone's control here tonight. Limiting exposure to members of your own household, practicing good mitigation strategies, wearing masks, being really careful, and that will only allow us to begin the year or the semester in a much better place, so that we can move towards those easing up of hopefully games and other privileges on campus that we wouldn't be able to do if there's a lot of positives right off the bat. So I ask for everyone's assistance. That'll be a great way to start off, as we did in the fall. I know we can all do it, and we certainly, think we have a good strategy with testing and quarantining and testing on arrival again, and then isolation, and then coming to class. Starting on that first Monday in February. But there are, as you know, increased cases, as I highlighted at the beginning, and it's very important that that quarantine is adhered to, and that every member of our community that is coming to campus takes that seriously. And I have every bit of confidence that we all did in the fall, and we can again now, and I thank you for that. We ask everyone to follow Massachusetts guidelines for travel, and know that out-of-state travel requires 72-hour tests prior to arrival in Massachusetts. We are asking for that test between the 19th and 21st, and again on arrival. So that's what Cushing requires, but the state does have their own requirements that you would need to look at as well. So just keep that in mind. Quarantine space for international students. We are starting this semester with almost exactly the same number of students that we started in the fall. We have many more international students coming to campus. Our space at the Doubletree almost has double the number of students as it did at the fall semester, so we're excited about that. Those students have arrived and are arriving in that space and are quarantining, and they have a isolation period similar to what we do here on campus. So certainly the arrival process for them is much more onerous, and certainly proud of the grit that they've shown and how they have traveled and arrive at the Doubletree, have to isolate for a period of time, testing, another week, and then arrival on campus, test again. So certainly that is a huge accomplishment for them, and certainly continue to be in communication with our faculty member at the Doubletree and our students there. Just overview on pre-arrival testing. So our staff working here at the school, which includes me and others who are here on campus, received PCR tests January 4th. Happy to say all those results are negative, which is a great start to our spring semester. All of our faculty, teaching faculty, received PCR tests today, January 14th. And then all employees, staff, and faculty will be retested next Friday, January 21st. So that's our ramp up for employees, which I thought I would share tonight. And then all students are required to obtain, as you know, a PCR test between January 19th and 21st, and then provide those results to health services before arriving to campus. So just want to make sure we stress that that is a document that will need to be submitted before arrival, that negative COVID test, so that you can arrive. And then on arrival, all students, similar to the fall, will receive a PCR COVID test on arrival January 28th and 29th. So arrival weekend, similar, as I had said, to our reopening in late August. We ask again that families sign up for those campus arrival slots. Please do that ASAP. If you haven't, upon arrival, students, as I just said, will take that PCR test, and then similar to the fall, proceed to the dormitory for on-campus quarantine. We called it our quiet period, campus pause, however what you want to determine it, very similar to the fall. We are hopeful that that test will come back in a shorter period of time. We've partnered with the Broad Institute, and anticipate a shorter time period for that isolation period, but that will be necessary again. And also remember, all forms are due tomorrow by 12 p.m. Eastern time. That's critical, as we have to order a specific number of tests for those arriving to campus. So we need that campus arrival sign-up form and all your other forms by tomorrow. So please, if you have questions, let us know as soon as possible. And if not, please, if you've been procrastinating, please get on and get those done as soon as you can. Arrival weekend, as I said, similar to the pause we had in the fall, we will have meals delivered, and Mr. Doyon will talk a little bit about that tonight, but test results anticipated to be approximately 48 hours after the final arrival time on that Friday. So sometime on Sunday, we're hoping to have that test, and hopefully we can be out on Sunday night and a little more towards normalcy and socialization. We'll have our Waddle structure similar to the fall, and there will be virtual programming on that weekend, similar to how we had some virtual programming in the fall semester. Post-arrival, so we have the January 31st, as I just said, sort of the tentative end of that quiet period based on the arrival of results. I will say our January 4th results came in pretty quick, so I'm hopeful that that trend continues. February 1st, on that Monday, in-person classes begin, afternoon and activities and athletics begin, and they'll begin in a way similar to how they did in the fall, and then progress as we have our next surveillance test on February 3rd. And then on the 22nd, our winter ends and second semester begins. Just a reminder that it is a 7-week period, so about 50 days that students will be on campus, which is about half of what it was in the fall. We have that spring break and then another 7-week period. So just looking at campus life, yes, similar to the fall with some slight adjustments and maybe adjustments over time depending on the public health situation. Hopefully there's some significant improvement there. We will continue with waddles, temp checks, masks, limited number of occupancy and offices and rooms on campus and dining, athletics on campus only, at least to start. There is, it is a 7-week period, as I just said, but no visitation or round trips at the beginning as well. And similar protocol for necessary departures and reentries, especially while cases are so high in our area. A lot of questions about vaccines, so I wanted to put it all in one slide just to give, many of you may have seen this looking at the news and other sources, but wanted to just show sort of Pfizer and Moderna. You've seen that those have been approved and authorized for emergency use in the US and some other countries, and some of the differences there, those are both mRNA platforms and 2 doses with a dose, 3 to 4 weeks, depending on which company you're using. The Moderna vaccine is 18 plus. Pfizer is the one that's recommended for 16 plus. So I think there was some confusion on the last webinar about, requiring student vaccinations, and certainly that's a ways off for anyone under 16, but certainly clinical trials have begun. And I know actually one of the physicians on our medical team, UMass Medical is a site for a clinical trial. So those have begun and we're learning about those, but it doesn't seem like that'll be available for quite some time. And common side effects that have been reported: pain, swelling, redness in arms. And then the next 2, which use a different platform, the adenoviral platform, so not RNA, but sort of like a piece of the virus, or sort of in layman's terms, maybe a dead virus. And those viral vector vaccines authorized for emergency use in AstraZeneca and other countries, not the US yet. Similarly, 2 doses with that 4-week apart, and phase 3 trial for Johnson & Johnson, and that's that 1 dose that we've heard about, and hopefully, if approved, will be distributed in the United States and the UK. One of the things that, in looking at the efficacy that may not be sort of thought, it's not reported widely, and I was listening to a physician today talk about, is that efficacy number is based on still using mitigation strategies, which, I certainly for me, it was the first time I had heard that reported. So it was interesting. I thought I would share tonight. So that 94, 95 is still in a world with masks and, regular hand washing and physical distancing, which, isn't reported when you talk about efficacy with the vaccine. So something interesting I thought I would share. And then here in Massachusetts, when we look at when can I get vaccinated for COVID-19, probably many of us in Massachusetts at least have seen this graphic with phase 1, which we're in the middle of now, December to February, and then phase 2. Which looks like K-12 educators would be included in that time period, and then phase 3 in the general public. So if you haven't seen that, that's certainly available online on mass.gov. Athletics. So we probably had about 1/3 of our questions focused on athletics, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about that tonight. I did address it a little bit at the beginning, but we will start with afternoon activities and winter sport offerings, which are in my Cushing, and if they're not in yours, they will be soon. We are talking to other schools with a variety of ideas, talking about scheduling, talking about what it would look like to play games, reserving some times to do that. But, the general consensus from the heads of schools that I'm talking to is that everybody is in a wait and see as they populate campus, as they get, see how many cases they have, as they start to test. If they're able to diminish the number of cases on campus, then they would look to have their students go elsewhere. So it's going to be a step-by-step wait and see process, unfortunately. I don't think in a COVID world there will be a time when I can get up and say, here's the schedule, it's going to happen. It's just not possible because there's so many milestones that need to occur in order for us to get there. We worked in the fall in a number of ways to try to get a game outdoors, and that didn't end up happening, and had some schools pull back from that. And then at the end, as you know, announced that we would do a basketball game on the last day that students were here, went through all the testing, and, our team, have to be in different vehicles, several different vehicles, because you can't have too many, and following guidelines. And then right hours before we were going to leave, or got notified by the other school that they wouldn't be able to do it. So I think that's unfortunately the reality of what we're seeing, is because we're not only creating athletic competitions, but we're creating athletic competitions between two environments of congregate living. And, when you look at public schools trying to play, or, maybe schools in other states trying to play, the reality and the environment that we're trying to live within okay, we can play in Massachusetts, we play other independent schools. We want to play independent schools that have similar mitigation strategies and testing requirements that we do. And then when you get to that list, having the conversations, and everybody is hesitant to move forward because of what it means, and all the unknowns. And it's almost, when you think about it, it's not a hesitancy to move forward because of COVID. It's a hesitancy, it's related, but it's a hesitancy to move forward of what's the next challenge going to be as we progress through these steps. And then if we go out and say, here's the schedule, and then something like what happened in the fall when we tried to do a basketball game happens, you have all that lead up, and nothing happens, and nothing occurs in terms of competition. So, that's probably a long-winded way to say that we are hopeful, we are planning, we are talking to other schools, we are trying to be as aggressive as possible and as safe as possible to do it in a way that provides the best student experience for all those on campus, all those athletes, especially on campus. And if we don't play other schools, we will continue to provide high-level experience here on campus. But, to be able to announce one way or the other 2 weeks before we even arrive to campus is just not possible. So that's the full transparency, and I'm certainly happy to have additional conversation with anyone who'd like to. And I think that covers probably the first 3 bullets. And we are continued to have a commitment to safety protocols and procedures. The athletic department really has a comprehensive process of, cleaning balls every so often, sanitizing benches, seats, and the list goes on and on. So, Ms. Viana can talk a little bit about that tonight. And also supplemental training, power source, and other ways that we can hope to improve that experience as well for those who are on campus. A little bit of a timeline going forward. So remote learning began last week, January 6th. We have our webinar tonight, January 14th, 2 weeks. We have our students arriving. Don't forget to sign up for your arrival spot and submit all forms by tomorrow. And then Monday, February 1st, our first day of in-person classes, 50 days after we arrive, is spring break. On March 9th, we will share repopulation. That was one of the questions, strategies and requirements prior to that time. So students from various parts of the world and country can plan for what that means. And I will now ask our other panelists to join us. Thank you for your attention tonight. Thank you for listening. Who knew that opening process would be continue into February and March, but here we are in the middle of January planning for the spring semester. And I will now turn it over to you and your questions, and we'll certainly do our best to answer them for you. So let me take a look at our Q&A. All right. Elise, the first question is a testing related question. Can you clarify the dates for Cushing to receive testing from students? Is there a medium ground so out-of-state students only get one test instead of 2 tests a week apart?
Sure, absolutely. So the testing plan for students is for everyone to have a quarantine test between 119 and 121. This is timed very specifically so that we know that students coming into campus have, halfway through their quarantine, have not contracted COVID. This will be their ticket to enter, so to speak, and the test result that we're really tracking and really looking for. This can be uploaded into the Spring COVID Magnus requirement, which should be open to all students at this point. On the 28th and 29th, we'll test students again. This will be that double negative that we need to get students onto campus. While we're waiting for those results, students will be in a quarantine while we're waiting. We should get them between about 24 to 48 hours, and then we'll know what the steps that we can take afterwards based on those results.
Great. Next question was athletics, and it was about why would we take a wait and see approach? And I think I can answer that since I was the one who spoke about that. And I think it's pretty simple. It's what all of our opponents are doing. So when we're in conversation, and Jen, I'll let you add to this, that's the consensus from our opponents. There isn't a hard commitment from anyone to play. Everybody is hopeful. We are looking at dates with a few schools who are interested in doing that. And we are committed to trying to be able to do that. But it's complex. So we were in the fall with those same schools having those same conversations for outdoor sports with less infection rate, and didn't get a commitment from anyone. So that's why it's a wait and see approach, is because there's no one that doesn't have that approach. And certainly New Hampshire schools, someone mentioned that in the Q&A. It's a different environment. There's different logistics and rules for how they can play, and there's a commitment from opponents there for playing. Jen, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, actually, just a couple days ago, I had a NEPSAC District 3 call with a bunch of ADs, and it seems like more and more schools are not committing to competitive athletics. It's just the reality that we're in. Our pool seems to be getting smaller and smaller, but there are a few local schools that are ready and willing to play as long as it's safe to do so. So, we are trying, we're doing our very best to get some more games on the schedule. But like I said, the pool seems to be getting smaller and smaller.
Josh, question for you. Will there be roommates?
Yeah, thank you, Randy. We're still working on that, but it's likely that we will be able to have roommates. And I know one of the pieces that we had sent out in the communication last week was a potential roommate form. So if you are interested in having a roommate, I would encourage you to find that form and use your Cushing email address. Typically students have to use their Cushing email address to sign up for that. And as we just get a sense of who would be returning to campus, we can start to identify housing needs, and it's likely we'll be able to do roommates. So we will also be in touch just to confirm the information we've received, and also if we are able to move in that direction.
Great. Jen, will day students be allowed to participate in sports and afternoon activities?
Yes. Yes.
Another athletic question, Jen. As athletics will be on campus to start, will there still be skiing?
Yes, we are planning to have skiing, recreational skiing, and snowboarding at Wachusett Mountain. We've been in contact with them. They're ready to have us. They've had a lot of safety protocols that they've implemented, from having to arrive dressed when you come to the mountain, using your vehicle for a warming station, porta potties, lamps, heaters. So they're ready. We're ready, and we're just waiting for the medical team to give the green light. And as soon as we get that, we'll be sending out the registration forms.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is a follow-up question from testing, which I think I can answer, Elise. It says, to clarify, I meant the Mass State testing requirement. So the Mass State testing requirement is between you and the state of Massachusetts. Certainly, we're not going to be an intermediary for that, but the testing that we require is what Elise was talking about.
Thank you, Randy.
That's done. Next one. Elise, another question for testing. For local students, can they test at Haywood Hospital again as they did in the fall?
Yes, absolutely. So Haywood will test our students regardless if they're symptomatic or not. What I do need is an email from the parent requesting the test, and I will email you back a lab order, which you'll need as well as the student's insurance card when you go for that testing.
Great. Thank you. Another one, I think there's confusion about the Massachusetts requirement. We're being asked to have a 72-hour test prior to arrival in Massachusetts. It is taking our state 1 week or so to get results. What will the on-campus testing be used? So again, the test for Massachusetts is between you and the state to submit those results. We require our testing as outlined, students from the 19th to the 21st, and again on arrival. And we certainly don't want to be an intermediary for that state test, but if we need to clarify that, let us know, and we'll be happy to have an individual. And that Monday's the 5th, April 5th.
I'm also reading the question here, and what sports are being offered in February. So we're in winter season right now. We're offering multiple levels of hockey and basketball. And then of course, I just mentioned alpine skiing team. And then for physical activity would be recreational skiing and snowboarding.
Will testing be required after students return from spring break? I anticipate yes. Elise?
I anticipate yes.
Yes. Elise, a question about students and teachers that have had COVID. Do you want to answer that?
Sure. So that seems to be the big question of the week. The medical team has kind of been looking at the science to determine what we know and what will be the best plan for safely onboarding these students. We know that the recommendation for testing a positive student is to not test for up to 90 days, and that the chances of reinfection within those 90 days is very slim, but there'll be an official statement coming soon.
Josh, question, is Cowell going to be an option?
It's a great question, and we'll have just a little bit more information next week just about what our housing options are as students really declare their intentions. And I think that really speaks to something you said earlier, Randy, just the importance of completing those forms by noon tomorrow, so we can have a sense of who is returning and how to best use our resources that we have here on campus.
Yeah, get those forms in tomorrow at noon, and then we can really get to work on all the dorm issues, roommates, where students are living, all the rest of it. Do day students sign up for one of the slots on the 28th or 29th for the arrival? Yes, the answer is same as the fall, absolutely. So you received an email with that sign up. If you haven't, send me an email and I'll make sure that you figure out why you weren't on that list. But yes, you would arrive the 28th, 29th, sign up for that arrival test, similar to the fall. And then at least after they receive that test, should they plan on going home?
Yes.
And then for a short, they would still continue to quarantine until results. Yeah. Great. Next question. Josh, this one's for you. Will students need to break down their room during spring break?
That's a great question, and I think part of it's hard to answer that right now. And we will continue to move through it just as we have, and part of the reasons why that is a difficult question to answer right now is we have a group of students who was kind of waiting to see what will happen for a possible return in March. And once we get kind of more clarity on that, we are really looking at what's in front of us, and we will deal with that next step when it's appropriate to do so. So we will obviously communicate, and we'll obviously as we have done hopefully throughout almost a year now, try to be as transparent and try to be as clear in our communication as possible.
Yeah, I think part of that is there's some hope, especially from our international population, that there could be more ability to return, at that April 1st, 2nd repopulation time, and that we would have much more dorm utilization, higher number of roommates. I'm sure students might want to move around if that's the case. And so that would come with probably the need to back up, right, and do that. So, or not, but, as Josh said, hard to answer. Interesting, as he also said, almost a year, we sent our first communication about coronavirus on January 25th last year, right? So 11 days from now, kind of a whirlwind, hard to think about, but we are approaching that year anniversary. Will we be considering not having spring break? I don't think so. Certainly anything is possible as we go forward, but with the number of people traveling and the overwhelming feedback we got that the 13-week stretch was too long, and folks making plans to have that time period available, I really want to try to stick to our milestone dates of spring break, graduation, all the pieces that guess question, but if sports are currently being played in mass at public schools, why is it so difficult for private schools to do the same? Yeah, certainly they're not being played at all, public schools, and they're being played to varying degrees, and a lot of towns are not having them. I read something recently that Brookline is not playing any sports, and I know there are others for public school. I think the other piece of this is that we are a congregate living environment. Right, so that's really the key, is that we're essentially a group of several hundred people living and learning together, and that any time these two schools that are both having a similar experience of having most of their students on campus, living, eating, living in dormitories, using community restrooms, right? There's a lot of interaction there with students, and then bringing those teams together. Where there's a lot of contact, touching, breathing on each other, whatever it might be, that independent boarding schools are pretty hesitant to do that, and certainly day schools are as well, especially in the public arena. But at the same time, there's an ability to not be together from 3 p.m. until midnight, which is, I think there's a positive aspect to that too, because we can, as you saw in the fall, a lot of public schools had to go private. They are hybrid. They had to sort of take pauses. They had to, so we had much more control. And part of that control is limiting the exposure and the comings and goings on campus. So there's pros and cons there. For fall single room students, will they be returning to their exact rooms, Josh?
For the majority, yes. Some students have requested for roommate, switches, and some students have also just have requested, if it's possible, to have a different living environment. But for a majority of our students, they should expect to be in the same rooms that they were in the fall.
Great, thank you. Next question says, I know there are a couple boys living in Cowell. First, I think that's not true, because we don't know if we're going to utilize Cowell or not. Will the same opportunity for girls in Shotland be allowed? So Shotland continues. We need that space for quarantine, and it has nothing to do with boy-girl. It has more to do with the location, the restrooms, the ability to maximize isolation and quarantine, to have a certain number of highest number of students per ability to have their own bathroom in that building. Cowell, don't know. Shotland, definitely we need that for entrance, exits, isolation, quarantine. Next question. Jen, talk a little bit about locker room use and day student athletes. Do they use the same locker room as boarders? How does that work?
Sure. So we were hesitant to start with issuing out lockers, and then we gave a few of the day students lockers so they would have a space to put their belongings. The day students who live on campus because their children are faculty and staff are asked to get dressed at home and then come down here to the space. All of the spacing in the locker room is designed for social distancing. So we try to keep them as safe as possible. We have signs everywhere. We have coaches watching them go in and out. And we also clean the spaces. Our cleaning crew goes in there and cleans it daily. So we are trying to keep them as separate as possible, but they do ultimately use the same space.
Thank you. Jen, similar question. If a student is a golfer, do they need to bring golf clubs now, or can they wait till after spring break?
You know, I would say that's your preference. We might have some opportunities where we have a net put up that you can, you know, drive some balls into. If you have your lacrosse stick or your baseball, softball glove, there may be opportunities where we have open gym where you can throw around. So personally, I would, but that's really your preference.
Great, thank you. Josh, 2 questions, both about activities. So what activities are we thinking about for the 7-week on campus?
Yeah, you know, a lot of, you know, some of that's going to be weather dependent on, you know, what we can have hosting outside. But I know our director of student activities, Donnie Connors, is working hard, and he has a few ideas on what a, you know, after we get through a few what we call transmission cycles. You know, did move downstairs to our typical student center. So, you know, so we are looking for more opportunities just where we can, you know, recreate that experience when we can, when also the health and well-being of the community, you know, is at the forefront of our thinking. And some of the other opportunities that we're looking at too is continuing, you know, having open gyms, and to also think about opportunities that we can bring into our dorm setting. You know, within Waddles, and also to create that bonding and to create some of those just experiences in our dorms as well.
Great, thank you. Raj, a question for you. Will the seminar classes continue when we get back in person?
They will not continue in their exact form, but we are certainly hopeful in terms of the questions and the topics that are being explored that will continue to drive programming and will be infused in regular class discussions. And that's something that, based on the initial feedback that we've had so far, seems like a very promising possibility.
Great. I can take this one. Is Cook going to be a housing option? So if you don't know, we had a dormitory in the middle of campus, Cook Hall, that we took down, summer of 2019. And since then, under construction, we have had a new dormitory on that site, which we announced recently to our faculty and staff. That would be sort of, if you look at the building, it's almost like 2 dorms. There's a north and a south side with an entry in the middle for faculty, and then entrances on either end for the students in those halls. Those are as I announced to our employees about a week ago, going to be named, or they are named, they're labeled right on the building, Carlisle Hall, after longtime faculty member Susie Carlisle, and Hancock Hall, after longtime faculty member Wayne Hancock. We're still in the finishing phases. I'd say we're 98, 99% done. The dorm looks great. I wish we could, you know, do a virtual tour here tonight, but perhaps as we get towards the next webinar, I could spend a couple minutes showing some pictures. We're still going to be doing punch lists and other finishing touches throughout the first 7-week period, and if it is available, would be later. I don't anticipate it though in the spring semester. We'll probably take our time make sure we have it dialed in, and then make sure it's up and running for the fall. It's a beautiful dormitory, 30 students on each side, so a total of 60 students, all double rooms, so 30 double rooms, and a really nice, modern, great living space. Next question. So Elise, this one's more for you about students returning later. So will students be allowed to return anytime later following the protocols if they do not want to do it now?
There is a late arrival protocol. We're strongly encouraging that students come on the arrival day, mostly because what we're trying to accomplish is establishing our bubble so that we can start opening privileges and looking at those different things. When you have a late arrival, it's puncturing the bubble. So there is a longer quarantine time, and it's really going to depend on when the student comes to arrive, because we want to make sure that we're maximizing that in-person time, especially with only the 7 weeks. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me and Josh Doyon, and we'll walk you through the process and kind of make sure that this is a decision that fits for you and your student.
Great, thank you. Question which I actually spoke about an answer to one earlier. Is there any way in which graduation could be delayed? I hope not. We really, as I said, want to stick to those major dates, the 22nd and then of spring break. So I guess anything's possible in this uncertain environment, but really our goal is to stick to our calendar as it is now. I can answer this with you, Josh. Will students new to Cushing campus get help learning their way around? Yeah, it's certainly an interesting time where we have students who are new to the school, but who spent a whole fall off campus, right? So they are coming to campus for the first time as sort of quote unquote new students. So we will have a program for those students to get to know campus. And I know we'll be in touch. Josh, anything you want to add about that?
No, exactly. We'll be in touch starting next week, just as we start to finalize.
Certainly something that we're considering, and we'll definitely bring it to the medical team. But in the beginning, we'll likely do live stream. So we have a camera up in the field house. We're actually putting another camera into Heslin, which is new and exciting. And then we have a videographer that'll help us to live stream hockey.
Great, thank you. Question: as you describe cases in the area have increased significantly and all students living on campus will require 2 tests to come to campus, why are we still allowing commuting students to come and go every day? And I think I've answered this question probably on every webinar that we've done so far, but I'm happy to continue to answer it. You know, our number of students coming and going is about 15. It's even less than at some times, and we certainly have had day students you know, go remote or choose that option, so it's a pretty low number, and again our medical team feels like that's an acceptable number coming and going. In addition, we do weekly surveillance testing, which Elise can talk about. In the fall we did 20% and then increased it over time, and those who are coming and going are more regularly included in that surveillance testing. Anything you want to add to that, Elise?
I think you've covered it. You know, looking at those that are more at risk, employees and students that come and go off campus. But in response to the COVID incidence levels rising, we will be increasing the percentage of how many people we are testing every week. So we'll hopefully be catching those positives, as you know, we know that, you know, everyone is nervous about the rising levels.
Great. Let me do a time check. You know, that was our last question, and it is 8 o'clock on the dot. So I will end it there. Thank you very much for your questions tonight, for your engagement in this conversation, for your continued patience and flexibility. I know it's not easy for anyone, you know, students certainly, families, faculty, staff, and this opening process that we've been going through continues to evolve. But thank you for your partnership, and we will certainly continue to communicate. As always, I'm happy to have individual conversations. If you feel like you didn't get the answer that you were looking for, or you were confused about, how we're moving forward, I'm always happy to have a Zoom or an individual phone call. And certainly I know it can be frustrating, and don't take it personally. So happy to have those conversations and continue the dialogue as we work together to get through this most unusual school year. So thank you for your time tonight. Thank you to our panelists for joining. And we look forward to our students coming in person on the 28th, 29th, and our remote students who are unable to join us continuing to participate from afar. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.